and welcome to an hour with the candidates on LPTV, Libertarian Party Television, a production of the Libertarian Party. Dan Fishman, executive producer. My name is Pat Ford, and I currently serve as the chair of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island. As we say every week, there are a few purposes for the show. We want to give the libertarian community an opportunity to meet our wonderful down-ballot candidates. Folks, the future is now. For years, folks have discussed the need, the opportunity for that quote-unquote bench for people who serve on town councils, water boards, board of educations, or in the case tonight, the New York State Senate. What we've demonstrated over the past few months is that we've got a wonderful array of quote-unquote down-ballot candidates who are uniquely poised to deliver the libertarian philosophy to towns and counties, burgs, cities, neighborhoods, literally around this nation. We've had folks from the most northeastern parts of the United States on out, of course, to Hawaii. And joining us tonight, an interesting candidate, a special candidate, someone who actually currently serves as United States Senator. And of course, I'm talking about George Borrello. George, welcome to LPTV.
Pat, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and hello to you and your audience.
Well, and thanks for joining us. You know, tonight what we're trying to do is we want to discuss libertarian, what I call lunch pail economic issues as they're delivered to your constituency. We often joke here that while we're all fans of a variety of forms of libertarian philosophy, Austrian economics, political theory, the average everyday voter, particularly in times of the coronavirus crisis, in times of COVID-19, in times of furloughs, market disruptions, right now are concerned about day-to-day issues. Well, that's what we like to talk about today. And also, George, this gives us an opportunity to introduce you to the libertarian nation at large. It's critically important that folks in Maine understand the importance of a candidate in New York, folks in Washington State understand how important it is for us to elect county commissioners in Florida, and of course, you know, in the city of Los Angeles, understanding why a candidate in a small town in Rhode Island can have so much impact on the libertarian world and, well, the electorate itself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's discuss New York's rather unique electoral format. You are currently sitting a New York State Senator. You're also what's called a fusion candidate. So talk to us about that and your background and how you arrived at this moment in time.
Sure. Well, thank you. And just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I come from a working class family here in Western New York. I come from Chautauqua County. For those of you that it's not like the rest of New York in the sense that when people across the nation think of New York, they think of New York City. But upstate New York is very rural. It's much more conservative. It's a lot of working class folks. It's not the concrete canyons of New York City. I grew up with both of my grandfathers farming grapes. My mother was a hairdresser, my father a plumber, I was the first generation of my family to go to college. Shortly after college, I started my own business supplying products and services to the hospitality industry. I grew that business into a successful company, sold that company, went to work for the people that I sold to, and traveled the country. Then I decided to get involved in local politics about a little over a decade ago, and I ran for the county legislature here in Chautauqua County because I saw our area, really suffering from a lot of bad decisions, a lot of them coming out of Albany, out of our state capital. But I also wanted to affect positive change. I wanted to focus on, our tourism industry, which I am a part of. So I did that as a county legislator for 8 years, and then the opportunity came to run for county executive. I left my private sector, full-time private sector employment, and ran for county executive in 2017 and won. And then the opportunity came up because our state senator had retired and went to the private sector, so we had a vacancy. And I ran for the position last year in a special election, and I won. with the support of the Libertarian endorsement, which I was very, very honored to carry. And you mentioned fusion voting. Very few states have fusion voting anymore. As I'm sure many of you know, that New York is unique in the sense that I'm a registered Republican. However, I can be cross-endorsed by the Libertarian Party and others. And that, I think, creates a strength for libertarians and others to be able to have that ability to cross-endorse a candidate, and I think it helps. It helps me, and it certainly helps other candidates. And while we may not agree 100% on all things, as Ronald Reagan said, as someone who agrees with me 80% of the time is my ally, and I think that that's an important point to bring when you start talking about fusion voting and making sure the Libertarian Party is able to have a voice in what happens in politics.
You clearly represent the pure form of capitalism. I've read a little bit about your background, some of your business practice, your entrepreneurial activities, and your outreach to the business community in your constituency. You talked about growing up in a family farm. How important was that sort of basic day-to-day lifestyle, that direct connection between labor, capital, product development, and delivery of the product? What lessons did that teach you?
Well, it teaches you a lot of things. First of all, there is no safety net in the private sector. There is no capitalism is not conducive to people doing things inefficiently. And one of the issues that I see in government, especially, is that you always have the safety net of the taxpayers, the taxpayer money tree, and it creates, just by the nature of that, it creates inefficiency. And one of the reasons I believe that we live in the most overtaxed, overregulated state in the nation here in New York is because the vast majority of people in state government, whether they're elected officials, appointed, or just bureaucrats, have no idea what it's like to have to operate a business, to have to make a payroll, to have to deal with the oppressive laws and regulations that have such an impact on our ability to do business. And New York is bleeding people. We are bleeding businesses every day. New York led the nation in outmigration over the last decade. And it is largely because we have this push towards socialism in New York State. And we are losing moderates, particularly on the Democratic side. The Democrats in the legislature especially have been primaried. The moderates have been wiped out and been replaced with people that are devout socialists. So this is a real problem in New York, and it's a problem that is not unique to New York, unfortunately, as we see this push towards socialism. And I do believe that, to go back to your original question, that the solution is to have more people that understand what it's like to have to own and operate a business, to have to make a payroll. The people that are on the front lines in our economy in so many ways. Right now our economy is on the brink because of this pandemic, but also because there are those that want to use this pandemic as a springboard to push us into socialism and into a totalitarian style of government, which we all know does not work. And that's where I believe that we have to stand up and say, no, this is not it. It's not worked in the past. And just because people, you have a new generation of people that don't know what it was like, when in previous generations, when we faced things, like the threat of communism, that now, you can recycle these bad ideas and really make, a whole new generation of children, young people, young adults that believe that, hey, this is a good idea. And that's where we are right now in this country, I believe. We have a bunch of people that are being influenced by the current crisis, and those people are now don't understand what it's like and what will happen in a rather totalitarian, socialist-based society.
Talk to us about the economic structure of your county, of your district. You mentioned a little bit about the agricultural side. Is there manufacturing still left? That's been a real bane to most of upstate New York, the outright flight, if you will, of manufacturing and the capital flight that's taken place.
Well, first of all, yes, there is. We are a strong manufacturing and agricultural community here in Chautauqua County and throughout the Western New York and Southern tier of New York State. When I was county executive, I embarked on a quest, if you will. I pledged that I would visit 100 businesses in my first 100 days of office, and I actually got to 107 different businesses in 100 days. And these weren't just dog and ponies where you walk in and snap a picture. We spent in some cases two hours or more, and the businesses shared with me what their challenges were, what their hopes were, what they thought their future would be. And here's the thing that I learned. First and foremost is, the rhetoric is there's no jobs in upstate New York. There's no jobs. But that just wasn't the reality. The reality was there were plenty of open positions. The challenge was people that could fill those positions. People that, number one, could pass a drug test and show up to work every day at the same time. That was a big challenge for people. And number two, the people that had the skills to fill those open positions. And so manufacturing is alive and well here. The real challenge is workforce. So we shifted our economic development strategy away from using economic development monies and these unfair practices of giving certain companies advantages over others with tax breaks and so forth. And we shifted from that to being focused on how do we develop a better workforce. If you want to keep our children here and keep them from leaving, the best way to do that is to ensure that they have the right skills to fill the positions that are open and currently available. That's also how we keep the businesses here. So we changed the economic development conversation in Chautauqua County while I was county executive, and now the focus really is on workforce, which is the number one issue when you start talking about companies and where they're going to locate, where they're going to grow, and whether they're going to stay somewhere or not.
In terms of other aspects of economic development, have you been able to start to move away from the build it and pray like hell someone will come up, or the incredible, if you will, buffet of tax breaks that some local communities are willing to provide for people to come in, while at the same time leveraging the existing tax base to pay more in order to make way for those folks?
In New York State, it's a difficult situation because you can't just flip a switch and say we're not going to offer those incentives anymore, particularly where we are. My district is about 4,000 square miles, and most of it borders the state of Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. So for us, and this is what I said to people before, and I was on the IDA board, our Industrial Development Agency board, when I was a county legislator. If we use every tool in our economic development toolbox, the best we can hope for is to level the playing field when Pennsylvania does nothing except just be what they are, which is a state that has less taxes and less regulation. So I would love to move away from this, the government picking and choosing winners and the idea that we have to give all these tax breaks in order to attract businesses here. The challenge is that you can't do that until you have a commitment to lower the burden for everyone. And that's where it becomes a challenge. That's something I've been pushing for, particularly now in the light of the financial crisis that has been created by this pandemic. We don't have the money to do this anymore. We don't have the money to provide these breaks. So instead, let's reduce the burden for everyone to encourage positive economic activity. And also, and it's not just about taxes, it's also about regulations. It's making New York a friendlier place to do business. It's about taking away, this mentality that, we have a very litigious society that we live in. And the trial lawyers here in New York State are a very powerful and influential group politically. And they lobby for laws that favor them. And those are things that create burdens on business. That increases the cost of doing business. It increases the cost of insurance. Increases the cost of things like your unemployment insurance, your liability insurance, the ability for people to be able to stay in business and stay alive. So we need to reduce the burdens and start making this a better place to do business across a broad spectrum. And that's what I've been pushing for in my time now, in my short time so far, less than a year as a state legislator.
Nationally, we've all become rather intimate, if you will, with your governor, for all the wrong reasons. everything you just touched on, is there any recognition of those issues by the executive branch and the Empire State? Are they aware, at least even tangentially, that on a couple of different sides, you're surrounded by lower cost of productions, environments, less onerous regulation, or are they seemingly oblivious?
Well, I will say this, our governor has gotten a lot of credit for how he handled the public health part of this crisis, and some of it is deserving. But the reality is that he where he failed miserably is in the reopening of our economy, and that's where he continues to fail, and that's where the mainstream media has given him a pass. They've allowed him to do these things. I was one of only 4 senators that voted against giving him this sweeping authority like no other governor has ever had. Back on March 2nd, we were called into a late night special session, given literally minutes to review this major change to the emergency powers that the governor has, and added all this sweeping language, and they tied it to funding for COVID, $41 million, to try and intimidate the state legislators into voting for it, saying if you vote against this, you're voting against money for this terrible pandemic that's about to be across New York State and across the nation. I was a brand new legislator at that point, brand new state senator, and like I said, I was one of only 4 senators out of 62 that voted no. And it was, by the way, it was 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. It was not all Republicans, because I looked at this as, we're not only giving the governor power to suspend laws, but something that I believe no other governor in the nation has, is the ability to write his own laws and to suspend not just state laws, but local laws, and rewrite local laws. It gave him the sweeping power to declare almost anything an emergency, even blight, as a natural disaster, essentially. So this was far too much power. And our governor has abused this power in many ways. But again, he's gotten this pass from the mainstream media. And there are things that had to be done because of the unknowns. But here we are 5 months into this, and our economy is suffering. We are bleeding revenue. And our governor thinks that he can, punch the federal government in the face every day with one hand and stick his hand out for a bailout with the other hand. And that's not working out. And so New York State has a huge challenge when it comes to finances. Our governor has no recognition for the negative impact on our economy and on the businesses that support all of these taxes, the people that are paying the bills. He really has no recognition of that. And that is a real major problem that's going to be a problem for years. So instead of trying to fix that problem, he's just essentially trying to extort money from the federal government. He wants $61 billion for New York State. I mean, he sounds like Dr. Evil. We had a $6.5 billion budget deficit before COVID. That's ballooned to about $15 billion because of COVID. And he's asking for $61 billion. And quite frankly, what he's looking for the federal government and the federal taxpayers to essentially subsidize every mistake that was made in the last decade and every mistake that he'd like to make going forward. And that's just not appropriate. New York does deserve a bailout. We are a state that sends lots and lots of money to Washington. So I do believe that New York deserves a bailout. But it does not deserve so much money that it can continue to make bad decisions.
Well, one of the great frontiers in I'll call it state spending these days is the open question about what to do with unfunded pension liabilities. And there are more than a few state governors who are essentially looking to turn COVID money into pension money because of these promises that they've made to state unions in particular, and the kind of deal with the devil that they've made in order to get those votes. How bad are New York State pensions at this point? I dare. I'm almost afraid to ask. I'm sure they're fully funded, aren't they?
I will say this: the state pension fund that funds state employees and those that participate in the state pension fund is healthy, and it's because they've made some good financial decisions and contributions. But there are a lot of liabilities out there that, in the future that are going to continue to grow. Many, people that are long since out of office, most of which are dead, made, promises many years ago in some, smaller municipalities, cities and towns and villages, that they would pay for health insurance for the rest of the life of their retirees. And quite frankly, I don't believe we should take that away from those that were made that promise 2 years ago, because that was the deal that was cut. But going forward, we have to stop these type of things from being part of that negotiation. And again, I don't think it's right to take away something that was promised to those folks. But we have to understand the economic reality of it. And the only way that we can start to address that is to change those things going forward with new employees. And let them know that, if you come to work, here's what the deal is, and and they can choose whether or not to do it. And I will tell you, as a former county executive, it's very difficult to recruit people to work in government. It's not like it was, a generation or two ago, where that was, especially in upstate New York, that was the brass ring, was to be able to get a government job. But not anymore. It's difficult to recruit people. It's very challenging. You look at what's going on right now with our attacks on law enforcement, and our first responders. It's difficult to get people to do those jobs. So I think that you have to be realistic and have to understand that government can work efficiently and effectively, and it should. So you have to start being more realistic with what the expectation is, so that we can trim back the cost of government. We can do so, fairly and effectively, and ensure that the number one, the promises made were promises kept. But going forward, that understanding that those promises are what put us in this horrible financial mess that we're in now.
Folks, if you're just joining us, George Borrello is here. He is the sitting state senator in District 57 for the Empire State, the great state of New York. He is a fusion candidate, a Libertarian and Republican endorsed candidate. And he's telling us, kind of giving us the backstory, if you will, to what's happening in the legislature and the relationship with the executive branch in New York, both pre and now during the plague, if you will, COVID. You are watching An Hour with the Candidates, a production of LPTV. Dan Fishman, executive producer. My name is Pat Ford. One of the issues, and by the way, part of the show is to focus on the mechanics of libertarian candidates, if you will, getting elected. So in reviewing your social media, it's clear, as you mentioned on the in the onset of the show, that you've got a passion for small business. And I guess my question is two-part, well, maybe three. First of all, talk to us about an initiative that I found fascinating, that I have yet to see in my world discussed. And it's highly impactful on small business in what I'll call the real world. And that's your analysis and your discussion of separating, if you will, the impact of COVID on unemployment, TDI, insurance rates. Every state's got their own little acronym for it. And separating that away, if you will, from the normal unemployment rates and the normal unemployment reimbursements that are dictated by the state. And I say that because twofold. I want to qualify the question. Part of the mechanics, particularly as a libertarian, in getting elected, is having that outreach, that connection with small business, because these are the folks who, quite frankly, who can really, really benefit from our help as libertarians, as part of our philosophy in reducing the size of government, reducing licensing issues, all of that. But in order to understand the issues that a small business faces, and they're different by locality, they're different by regime, they're different by different parts of the country, obviously, one needs to establish that connection in order to dig through the mess, the rubble, if you will, particularly post-COVID, and find issues like TDI, which are the ultimate lunch pail issues that probably most people in America would never, ever think of as being so impactful in government. So kind of a long and winding road I've just given you, but talk about that initiative, but also talk about how you discovered it and how important, in terms of the mechanics of an election, is to have that real granular connection with small business.
Well, I'm a small business owner myself, even currently right now. My wife and I own and operate some restaurants, and they're seasonal. Some of them are seasonal. We on Lake Erie here, here in beautiful Chautauqua County on the Lake Erie shoreline, and we employ nearly 200 people, and most of them are part-time and seasonal. So it was a real challenge for us when the federal government decided to do this $600 bump for unemployment. To pick a random number. I mean, to me, the best solution would be make people whole. Okay, I understand that people lost their jobs through no fault of their own, and businesses had to close. And those people should have been made whole and made as much money take home as they did while they were working. But to pay people more money, and then when those businesses reopened, and here in New York State, what I said about the unemployment insurance was this: it was a mistake made in Washington that was weaponized in New York State, because New York State gave the longest list of reasons why you'd be able to quit your job and still collect unemployment, including having just the fear of catching COVID-19. And I understand that there are people out there that have, health risks. I understand there are people out there that are taking care of their family members who are at risk. I understand there are people that lost their job and were not able to find another one. Those people deserve benefits. But, you hear stories from businesses that just could not hire people back because they knew that it was financially more beneficial for people to stay home and collect unemployment than it was for them to work. I just had a conversation last night with a couple whose 2 college-age kids, who they said, you're going to go to work. You're not going to sit back and collect that $600+ and go goof off all summer. You're going to work. And it was difficult for them because they all watched their friends, sit around and collect this money. So somebody who was not working full time, not supporting a family, none of those things, was making that extra $600, and it was having has played a tremendous havoc on our economy while wasting billions upon billions of taxpayer dollars. So which brings me to the question which you asked, which is about unemployment insurance and that granular issue. Anybody that owns a business knows that your unemployment insurance is based on what they call the experience rating. What that means is the more people that collect unemployment that work for you, the higher your unemployment insurance rates will be. And this is a government-run system. So while in the case of my wife, who runs our businesses, as she watched the unemployment claims pile up on her desk, she was unable to hire people. So you have a business that needs employees. And by the way, this is the experience of so many small businesses that are trying to reopen and that were struggling and are continuing to struggle as part of this pandemic, who are going to end up having to pay a huge increase in unemployment insurance when they had jobs that could not be filled essentially because of a mistake made by government. And that's where this is a kitchen table issue that's so important to people, because these businesses, many of them are not going to survive. So I understand that the people looked at it and said, hey, I can make more money at home than I am working. And the people that took that, made that economic decision for the short term. The long term, for many of them, will be that the job that they left is not going to be there now, because these businesses are closing at an alarming rate, and they will continue to close. So it was an unintended consequence of a knee-jerk reaction to this pandemic that is going to have long-term, very long-term negative impact on our economy and our workforce.
And what's fascinating to me, darkly fascinating, if you will, is this is clearly, if you will, brought to light. And I don't want to be polite about this, but there's no better word, how ignorant many taxpayers are relative to the costs of running what I'll call legitimate business. But I mean by legitimate businesses, you've got hundreds of people on the payroll. They are on the payroll. You are paying significant contributions in terms of taxes and payroll taxes as well as astonishingly high insurance costs, I'm sure. Simply the amount of money you need to make every day to when you wake up has got to be awe-inspiring. So again, you government makes a terrible mistake, and ultimately it's the small business sector that, like in so many cases, whether it be how the government handles healthcare, whether how the government handles workplace insurance, whatever, you get to be, on the receiving end of all that pain. Folks who've read a certain novel will talk about that. Who is John Galt moment? I got to ask you, in a state like New York, and we've had a number of candidates due to the fact that a particular state like New York has an activist state chairman who calls me routinely with suggestions for candidates. I'll just put that out there. And he does a wonderful job, by the way. Are folks at that John Galt moment in New York when you look at the sheer accumulation of issues like this?
I think that, look, there's only so much pressure you can put on anything before it breaks, right? And we are at that moment now. Yes, I think people are. It's when things hit home personally for people, and the left has been very good at class warfare, telling people that we can have all the things we're telling you. We can have all of these fantastic benefits. You can sit at home and not work, and we'll pay you. All we need to do is to make sure that the wealthiest people need to pay more and pay what they deserve, or what they should pay. The flaw in that is that there is not enough wealth in the world to support what the far left wants to do. And the far left, by the way, is now in charge at the national level with the Democratic Party. And again, I hate to be partisan, because let me tell you something. I come from a family of Democrats. My father, in fact, even my stepmother is the chairman of the Democratic Party for our town. And this is not the Democratic Party that my parents and grandparents signed up for. They are working class people, and the Democratic Party at one point was the party of the working class, and that is not the case anymore. They have been commandeered by this, the AOCs of the world, that have said that it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if you're not capable of working, even if you don't want to work, that's okay. We'll take care of you. And that's not a sustainable model. And this is not you cannot continue to move forward like this. So to answer your question, this is the moment now where it's going to start affecting everybody and everything. And you look at what's going on right now. You look at the unrest that we have, the civil unrest. You're looking at the fact that the spike in crime that we're seeing, from these far left policies that have now been instituted in New York State, and in major cities across the nation. And you have to realize that this is going to impact everyone's quality of life. This is going to impact, who is getting hurt most with these businesses that are being burned and looted? It's small mom and pop businesses. It's people living in minority communities, and people that were already impacted by crime that are being impacted by crime even more. So I think that that people are starting to realize that this is not what I signed up for, if you will. This is not when you have these wonderful idealistic views of a society where everyone is equal, which is a great aspirational goal that and should be our goal. But when you start talking about things that are essentially creating chaos and spikes in crime and the people that it impact are the people that you supposedly are saying you want to protect. I think people are starting to have that real understanding that this is not the path. This is not the path to that.
Let's talk about the mechanics of running for office. You've successfully run for office, so to a certain degree, you do have the advantage of incumbency, per se. That can represent different things in different places and different times. But one of the things that we're trying to do is give libertarian candidates and give their supporters, volunteers, campaign finance contributors, whomever, a real snapshot of what it takes to win. So in your race, you talked about an astonishing, how many thousands of miles is your district?
Over 4,000 miles. 4,000 square miles.
Holy cow. So give us a landscape, if you will, of media availability, how many voters, what your win rate is, and just a real snapshot of your campaign in terms of, volunteers, what they're doing. Give us that kind of overview, that worldview that you've got.
Well, being in a rural community, largely rural community, we have a lot of challenges. A lot of people don't have good internet access. Broadband is a huge issue. We have an aging population. We have we've lost a lot of media outlets. We don't have, we used to have a local TV station, for example, in the city of Jamestown in Chautauqua County. That's no longer there. So reaching people is difficult in rural communities to begin with. It's not like being in a major metropolitan area where you have we have newspapers, yes, and we have cable television, but it's really it's still grassroots, and that's what's making this year the most challenging. Honestly, last year and in the years prior when I've run, I spent my time out there, meeting people, whether it's at a firefighter installation banquets or at local festivals and fairs, and going out to all these charity events that are out there, or just simply going downtown and shaking hands with people. That's all gone now. So now we are really relying on social media, and we are relying on even things like this, an opportunity to speak directly with people, through virtually, and that creates a challenge for so many of us. But I think it's more of a challenge, quite frankly, for it's less of a challenge for incumbents, and I am an incumbent at this point, and it makes it more difficult for those challengers, because there is finding that platform now is much more difficult, and social media is relatively inexpensive, but to reach a mass audience and to really get into the homes of those swing voters, it costs a lot of money, and so we are out there, spreading our message. Volunteers are the folks that are out there ensuring that as we get into more and more into the campaign season, if you will, that we're going to be out there wherever there's that opportunity, whether it's doing literature drops at doors and making sure signs get out, ensuring that people are when we're doing something that it's being pushed out on social media. That's the campaign. This 2020 campaign is going to be heavily reliant on social media and those virtual direct interactions with voters.
How important is it to raise money, not just for the obvious reasons, that extra $500 means, another Facebook drop, that, that $250 that someone donates to you can mean a small cable television buy. How important, though, is it to raise money so that individual voters feel invested in your campaign?
I think it's very important, and quite frankly, I have been reluctant, and many others have been reluctant to try and to try and pursue those individual donors at this moment, because people are hurting and they're unsure of the future. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you that last year, in the campaign for the special election, the vast majority of my donors were $50 or less, and I think that's great, and I think that you can get people that want to give you $10, $20, $25, $50. It's more about the show of support, saying I believe in you. Right. And that's really and this year that's more difficult, and we are certainly continuing to pursue that. But you do those things by doing a kind of a casual cocktail party. That's at least what I did, where people could come out and have a beer and have a conversation with you, the candidate, and other candidates that come to your events, and for $25, so those are the kind of things that we can't do right now. Here in New York, we are limited to gatherings of 50 people or less, so to do a $25 event, for example, it just the numbers aren't there for that. So it's very challenging. But I would absolutely much rather have someone give me that $10, $20, $25 donation because it means so much to me that they have faith in me. And this year, it's extremely challenging to do that.
What type of folks do you have involved in the campaign? And do you have a campaign manager? And what are some of the individual tasks that you're getting people involved in?
Right now, it's about making sure that our message is out there on social media. Yeah, I do have a campaign manager, and it's about kind of recognizing where there are events going on, things going on in our district, and when I'm involved in it, whether it's just something as simple as going out and volunteering at a food drive, or engaging in advocacy on behalf of certain constituents, making sure that the message gets out there that this is what we're doing, this is how we're representing you, and how we're being your voice in the state capitol. So and that's something you do on the official side also. Of course, you want people to understand what it is you're doing and what you believe in, and how you're fighting for them. And so there's that transition, so you can ensure that when it comes time to vote, people know that this is who you are, what you're about, and what you're doing to affect positive change. So getting that message out there is everything that I've asked my team to do, is to ensure that people understand who we are, what we stand for, and what we're doing to make sure that the voice of our constituents is being heard.
You talk about personal connections and the intense exercise you went through at the onset of that, after that special election, and literally immersing yourself in the local business community. That sounds in a sense such an obvious approach. It sounds easy to folks, but in terms of time commitment, in terms of the kind of conversations you've had, how much of an investment was that immersion, and how important was it to create the sense that you were seeking people's input, not merely attempting to dictate to them your personal opinions?
Well, it was critically important. The political rhetoric is, and I was told this by seasoned politicians, all you have to do is go out there and talk about jobs and taxes, jobs and taxes. You're going to bring more jobs. You're going to bring more jobs to this area. And, that sounds good. But when you talk to a business owner who says, okay, I'm having a hard time hiring people right now. Let's just use welders as an example. If I had 30, trained welders tomorrow, I'd have 30 jobs for them tomorrow. So you're going to go out and attract a company and give them all kinds of economic development benefits, tax breaks, all that stuff. And they're going to come in, and now they're going to create more competition for those welders that we don't have. Mm-hmm. And they can afford to pay them more because they're paying less in taxes than the guy that's been here. That's the flaw. So for me, making that direct connection with the businesses, and again, as a business owner myself, and making sure that our economic development strategy was tailored to the needs of the businesses that are here first.
Excellent.
Was critically important.
Because that raises two very important points. Number one, for whom is economic development meant for? Is it meant for the folks that have, in many cases, in a place like Southwestern or Western New York, or the Southern tier, families that have been there for generations, if not by American standards, eternity. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, having that breakthrough moment when folks understand that the picking of winners and losers, cash-based, tax break-based economic incentives are literally paid for on the backs of the existing businesses, where existing businesses, whether it be in the competition for the consumer dollar or existing businesses and the competition for a labor workforce are literally subsidizing the efforts of their competition.
And that's exactly the point and that's what we learned. And that was the frustration of the business owners that were here. You look at things like, agriculture is one of the largest industries in our area. And, I was just at a farm last week, sixth generation of is now
Wow.
the farmers, sixth generation, and they are struggling. Why are they struggling? Well, because of things that are beyond their control. Look, like I said, I have farming in my background. Farmers want to they want to work hard, and at the end of the day, they want a fair price for the product that they produce. That's all they want, to put food on their table, and to have a sustainable business. And what impacts them? Well, you have this devastating, what was called the Farm Labor Fairness Act in New York State, which essentially dramatically increased the cost of doing business in New York State as a farmer. You have commodity prices that are constantly fluctuating that is out of their control. You have trade negotiations that are out of their control. Essentially, everything that has the greatest impact on their ability to just produce a good product and get a fair price for it is out of their control. And in New York State, the cost of doing business as a farmer, the base cost is more than double the average for the rest of the country. So agriculture in New York is incredibly important, and it has never been under more stress than it is right now. And those are the kind of things, because again, those businesses that I visited and continue to visit now as state senator, agriculture is a big part of that, and they're struggling. And we have to have a better understanding that those are the people that need the support, and when the support they need is to unshackle them from the restraints and from the government interference that ultimately jeopardizes their business.
The very federal representatives that supported either tacitly or personally tariffs on other markets for farm products are the ones that seem to come around every 2 years and spout the normal nonsense, which is, it's fill in the blanks. It's small business is the backbone of our county, or farming is the backbone of our county. And they ape these words, yet they seemingly have lost any connection with the reality of how those very same people are able to stay in business. Now, in terms of agriculture where you are, what are the primary products? Is it Concord grapes? Is it what are folks selling?
So Concord grapes, this is the largest Concord grape growing region in the world. It is largely along the lake shore, along the Lake Erie shoreline, the Great Lakes. Dairy is also big in this region. So those are the two biggest. And then, after that, you're talking about livestock, beef and poultry. But the two biggest are grapes and dairy. And again,
Right.
very much under strain in so many ways. And you're absolutely right. One of the things that, and again, I'm, as a business owner and someone who started his own business, one of the best things you can do to protect your business is to diversify. And most politicians, their solution when it comes to agriculture is subsidies. And here, we're going to give you some money and hopefully things are going to get better. That's largely what the solution is. But I embarked on something a while ago to help bring some diversification for our grape farmers and dairy farmers, and that was to get into other crops, hops and small grains, which are used in brewing, distilling, baking. Mm-hmm. And so my feeling is, if we're going to help them, let's help them create a more resilient business and ensure that that future generations and people want to get into farming. And so long story short was I pursued this, found an entrepreneurial organization that wanted to come here, and they want to essentially create a vertically integrated agribusiness that will support farmers, because part of the problem of getting into a new crop is the risk involved, and the fact that for example, you can't just get into hops. It's expensive, and you need to have a market for it. So if one farmer decides to grow hops, it's very difficult because one particular brewer or distiller can't commit to them, because if something happens to that crop, then that screws up their product line. So we've started and actually is now moving forward is it's now called Empire State Brands, and it is going to help farmers here locally, dairy farmers, grape farmers, to help them with the capital infusion they're going to need, also along with the quality control, harvesting equipment, storage, distribution, and even manufacturing of hops and small grains to help them diversify and to give them that, for lack of a better term, co-op type of a structure, where you can have someone who's ensuring that the quality is right, that that they're able to meet the standards to create a high value product that's beyond a commodity level, and it's really going to be a game changer. And to me, that's how we get better involved in helping any industry, is to help them be more resilient. And handouts, and look, like I said, I know a lot of farmers, they're not looking for handouts. They're looking for an opportunity and fairness. And that's what this particular initiative is about. And I think going forward, that's the way we have to look at this. Handouts don't get us anywhere. It doesn't create resiliency.
You have to somehow end the circle of what I call economic violence. In the case of so many farmers around the country who, in addition to COVID, in addition to severe regional droughts, had to also compete with tariffs, which are effectively a tax on the consumer. Only in America could we put tariffs on a product and then try to indemnify the farmers, if you will, from additional risk by giving them subsidies, which of course were then financed by the very same people upon whom we levied the tariffs. And that's what we call circular violence here on the economic violence here on An Hour with the Candidates. And as insane as that sounds, that happens everywhere, doesn't it? Particularly with the food industry.
Yeah, it's kind of the Rube Goldberg model of economic development. Is this complex way that we're going to get to a simple solution, and it is free markets, of course. When you look at, like I said, things that are beyond the control of our people in agriculture, tariffs is chief among them, and the United States is still the world's largest exporter, so we have the most to lose in a tariff war, and that's what sometimes politicians don't understand. I do agree with the president when he says that we've had for many years unfair deals with a lot of countries where we were in essentially no-win situations. When they heavily tax, tariff our products while we allow their products to come to the United States, tariff-free, and that is an unfair and uneven playing field. And there are some situations where there are economic benefits to that, but not in the situations that we have currently. So ultimately, removing all tariffs everywhere would largely benefit the United States, but it also would be devastating to small economies and developing countries. So you're never going to be able to achieve that because it's never going to be to the advantage of everyone. But at the same time, we have to understand that we are still, in so many ways, the breadbasket of the world. We produce, especially when it comes to things like grains that are difficult to grow in other areas, and those are exports that support our agriculture industry and also help us from a national security standpoint. Because if we don't have the markets to grow those products, then we start losing those farms, and we are going to have to start going elsewhere for those products. And I don't think, we don't want to be a nation that imports basic food needs. We, especially a nation as large as ours that has so much farmland. So that's a continuing, ongoing struggle.
Senator Borrello, this is the part of the show that we refer to as shameless self-promotion. So feel free for the next couple of minutes to engage in shameless self-promotion. Where can folks volunteer? Where can they donate? Where can they find out more about you and your campaigns?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I really appreciated this opportunity, and this hour has flown by. Here in New York State, we are fighting a true battle for the soul of our state, and it's really kind of reflective of what's going on in our nation. We have the ruling class in Albany, our state capital, that has become, just driven by radical agendas. And it is destroying our state. New York City has quickly gone from being one of the safest large cities in the world to a cesspool of crime. Crime has been spiking, and New York City is the largest municipality, obviously, in New York, and one of the largest in the nation. And the downfall of New York City impacts all of us. We need a strong voice. We need strong voices in Albany. They're pushing back against this, against these radical policies that have, quickly destroyed our state. This so-called bail reform that has turned into revolving door justice and released violent criminals onto our streets who have reoffended time and time again before their first time at trial. I have stood up and been outspoken on these topics, and the fact that if we are going to have a state where people feel safe, where people can raise a family, where people ultimately want to live, then we need to push back against this. And that's something that I have been pushing hard for in my time as a state senator, in a short time as a state senator. So you saw my website, voteborrello.com. It's 2 R's and 2 L's. You can find me on Facebook. If you want to learn more about me, please go and check out my Facebook posts. This was an interesting week of Senate hearings where I engaged, with our Department of Labor and our elections commissioners and people that are involved in the healthcare crisis that we're experiencing with the nursing home deaths. So I would encourage you to look at my posts, watch those videos, and New York is a diverse state. We have very conservative areas like where I am, working class, agricultural areas, and then we have New York City, which is a whole other world. So I would say to your listeners from around the nation that New York is not what you see in the concrete canyons of New York City. And I speak on behalf of the hardworking people in Western New York and the Southern Tier that just want to, raise a family, do their job, and as I said, get a fair return for what they've invested in their life here in New York State. And that's what I'm ultimately all about, is about ensuring that people are able to do that safely and fairly, and that's what I will continue to push for in my job as a New York State Senator.
Excellent. Folks, a little bit of housekeeping. Joining us next Friday night, Darrell Perry. He is a candidate for the governorship of the great state of New Hampshire. And John Gunther, another New Yorker. This time he's running for office on Long Island. The same state as you're in, but somehow it seems a lifetime away. And also, folks, I'd ask you, if you have a few moments, there's a new show on my other network, the Coalition Radio. We call it the Joe 20 campaign update. Every week, immediately following this show, we're going to have key players in the presidential and vice presidential campaigns. Tonight, Steve Dosbach, he's the campaign manager, will be joining us to talk strategy and issues and messaging. We'll be doing that every week. In fact, Joe herself is going to be joining us on that show next Friday. You can watch that at facebook.com/The Coalition Radio or coalitionradionetwork.com. But a big shout out to our guest tonight. He does represent, interestingly enough, a fusion candidacy, but it's clear that we're winning him over to the libertarian side. So hopefully he'll be there with a number of other great candidates that we've had on in the show in the past few months from New York. And there will be the opportunity to have a libertarian caucus. Imagine the worlds that could change. Folks, again, the primary purpose of this show is to bring to you across the libertarian nation all our quote-unquote down-ballot candidates. But when we say down-ballot, we don't want to be the pejorative. It's candidacies like this, the town councils, the water boards, the boards of education, that represent the immediate future of the libertarian movement, and that future is now. We've got hundreds of candidates eminently qualified with great business backgrounds, great educational backgrounds, running across the spectrum of respective offices. And it's in candidacies like this that ultimately will demonstrate to our fellow Americans our philosophy, how we can change lives, And in troubled times like this, how we can look to government not as a dictator, not as an autocrat, not as someone who on a top-down basis dictate to us how we should live our lives, but we as Americans and as citizens can join together to find solutions for our community and from our community. Folks, you've been listening to An Hour with the Candidates, a production of LPTV, Libertarian Party Television. A big shout out to Dan Fishman, who serves both as mentor and executive producer of this organization. My name is Pat Ford. I look forward to you joining me later tonight, and particularly next week. Folks, it's time to take it personally. It's time to get involved in campaigns. It's time to get busy, time to take it seriously. This is our time. Let's make it happen. We'll see you next Friday.